Unfortunately, this is one of the biggest things that we can talk about, and there's a bunch of new discourse that always seems to be coming up about Steve Yzerman and his departure from the general management position of the Detroit Red Wings that, I don't know, man, it keeps things fresh. At least, in my opinion. I know we've been making a bunch of videos talking about Yzerman and the departure from Detroit and the Larkin trade request and how all of this plays into the summer that Detroit is having as an organization. But I wanted to just go out there and read some posts on the R Detroit Red Wings subreddit. I wanted to read some comments on those posts and give my opinions on what this all could mean. And how everything came about as well, because I do think that is important to acknowledge the, I don't want to say bad blood. I don't want to say that. He's still in the organization after all, right? With that said, let's just go out there and read this post made by JTM1450 on the R Detroit Red Wings subreddit. They went out there and asked a question about the timing of Stevie's departure. I know it's been a question raised by everyone, but why was Yzerman's departure announced now? And whose decision was it really? Helene St. James claims it was Steve's choice. Khan claims it was the organization's. If it was the organization's decision, why did they not keep it under wraps until they had a new GM lined up? Why make it seem like they are so desperate to have Steve out that they announced it with no new direction in place? Clearly, they have interest in protecting Steve's reputation since he was, quote-unquote, promoted, so why make it seem like such an urgent matter to get him out of the chair? Additionally, if they were so desperate to strip him of the role, why did they announce it after the draft on July 1st? This post then says, it makes me wonder if Steve just up and quit all of a sudden. You'd think if he went to Chris and said he wanted out, he'd fake it for a few weeks and then help hire the new guy, then make a joint announcement to make it seem like it was truly a joint effort between him and the organization. Steve doesn't seem like a quitter. It makes me think something happened to where, 1, Stevie Y said, I want out ASAP, and I'm not willing to go through the charade of acting like I'm at the helm when finding my replacement. Or 2, it was the Red Wings organization's decision, and for some reason they wanted it announced ASAP so Steve wouldn't be making any more moves or decisions as GM, despite letting him have control over the draft and the start of free agency. Something isn't making sense, and maybe there is a third option I am not seeing. I doubt it's the Larkin situation because that's been marinating for so long. Maybe Chris really wanted the Robertson offer and Steve turning it down was the final straw? Maybe the organization was worried about the hiring process getting leaked and they wanted control over the narrative. Curious to hear everyone's thoughts. Now, honestly, I feel like there is a lot of inserting and if-then type of thinking going on over here, and there are a number of ways that you can interpret it. Obviously, having different reporters in the Red Wings beat claiming different things gives us more reason to debate amongst ourselves. What actually is the truth? Did Stevie Y want to leave? Did the Red Wings kick him out? And with the timing of this all, especially with no new replacement being put right then, was this something where the Red Wings were actually more pushing Yzerman out the door on their own timeline, and they also wanted to get their guy in and start that process, or was Stevie Y just so adamant to leave at this time as well? The top reply goes out there and says, hey, you can't keep an NHL GM search under wraps. And I think this articulates a lot of why the Red Wings may have pushed that button. If Chris was poking around for a new GM, we would have heard about it. And you don't start looking 2 months before the season starts either. If this was planned, it's not a great look. That was my first thought. Zero chance that it wouldn't leak. This is definitely one thought that I had. The news took everyone by surprise because Yzerman's departure was sudden and unexpected. Now, I do agree with some of these comments as well, too. It's like, hey, if your plan, if you internally were thinking, hey, we don't really think Stevie Y is the best guy for the job anymore, why would you give him the draft and free agency? Why would you let him be there. And if Yzerman himself was willing to stick it out up until then, I do question what made this decision happen at this point. If Steve was interested in leaving, why would he want control of the draft and free agency? Why would he be in charge of getting those Robertson negotiations? And why would there be any conclusions on those? The conclusion that we got from the supposed Jason Robertson, Dylan Larkin trade discussion was that Stevie Y was not interested in getting Jason Robertson onto the team because he didn't know that J-Rob would be interested in signing in Detroit. But if Yzerman was thinking about leaving anyway, why would he make that choice and then bounce? Would it not be more reasonable to say, hey, okay, this is a trade discussion that can be happening. I'm going to step down so that the organization can get somebody else in here instead who is more equipped to handle discussing this because they're going to be in charge of the Red Wings' future, and I'm just going to be out. If Yzerman had a bigger say in the departure of him as the GM than we have been led to believe, then that also makes things a little more difficult to process as to why it went down this time. I think the simplest explanation, Bryce Cause says, is that Steve had been eyeing retirement for a bit, but planned to stick it out as GM for at least a little longer, and ownership was on board. He is 61, he's been doing this his whole life, had mentioned it previously, so it tracks. Then Larkin's trade request hit. Seeing the Wings at a juncture, he and ownership probably decided to move up his retirement a bit early to let a new GM make the big call. It was too late to quit pre-free agency and the draft, so what happened after? Now, I do think that the timeline of the Larkin trade request also does influence this too. By all accounts, it seems like Dylan Larkin made the official request to the Red Wings sometime after the season ended. And if we think about it like that, okay, well, there was a few weeks of playoff hockey that, of course, the Red Wings did not participate in. And if there was already some sort of a discussion between the Red Wings and Stevie Y that Stevie Y's retirement would be coming soon, then I guess it makes sense to have just accelerated the timeline a little bit earlier, especially if the plan was for Stevie Y to have another off-season's worth of time where he's able to do his business and draft the players that he wants and sign the players that he wants, and then try to leave the team in good hands as he transitions to a new role and somebody else transitions to the GM. But Larkin asking out is potentially the big speed bump that causes that plan to go sideways. There's another post on the R Detroit Red Wings subreddit by Bald Ass Head Coach that asks, what was the moment where you started to worry about the Yzerman tenure? Some replies are really interesting here. When Yzerman traded Wallman in a second for nothing, this was the beginning of the end. Another reply goes out there and talks about how I started to worry this week. When he stopped being GM, I thought, I don't think this is going to end up working out. Another reply, the offseason after 23-24, the Justin Hall acquisition, the hiring of Derek Lalonde, when he ended up drafting Keenan Draper. That's really funny. Ay. The Keenan Draper draft pick will live in infamy, won't it? Unless the guy ends up becoming as good as his father. Father or uncle? Let's just go out there and fact check that first. Keenan Draper. Okay, father. Yeah. Chris Draper right there. Red Wings prospect, too. Also playing in Grand Rapids. So, with all that said, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. The timing of the Steve Yzerman departure is very intriguing, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All this makes little sense if you try to piece it all together with the context of the Wings and the other conversations that have been surrounding Dylan Larkin and whatnot. How do you make sense of it? Do you have an explanation, or are you just here for the vibes? Let me know in the comment section below all your opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.